Hi, I'm Kevin,
And I'm Amanda.
and we are serving up
All that jam. A lighthearted look at the weekend jam bands.
where we break down the jam scene's biggest stories,
Talk new bands.
upcoming tours,
And show reviews. A little laughing, some hot takes, and an always positive message for the community.
Rob Lind.
Today we're joined by Rob Lynn from the Sonics. I know a lot of people probably have not heard of the Sonics, but they've heard of a lot of bands that love the Sonics and are an influence. Myself, I was 9 years old, given like 145s by my stepdad, and one of them was Psycho, backed with Have Love Will Travel, and that is where I became aware. How you doing today, Rob?
Well, I'm doing great, thanks.
Fantastic. So you got your start pre-British invasion, I guess, like early 60s, maybe even 1960s. What inspired the raw sound of the Sonics in those early days? Because there was nothing like that at that time.
Well, where I grew up was in the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. Later, when I went to school, I moved to Seattle. But in that part of the country, it was a rock and roll band hotbed. There were rock and roll bands everywhere. And I've made the distinction before that there's two cities there, Tacoma and Seattle. Tacoma is smaller. It's a waterfront town. The guys in the Sonics and me also, our dads were blue-collar workers. My dad worked on the waterfront. He ran a crane delivering lumber to ships to go to Japan. And so it was a little bit, I've made talking to some of the Brits that I've run into over the years, it's a little bit like Liverpool and London. The music scene, there were all kinds of bands in Seattle, and really good ones. There were sax players that were 20 times better than I am, and they were really almost jazz oriented, played real tricky stuff. And down in Tacoma, the guys that I was with that eventually became the Sonics, we just wanted to rock and roll. We wanted to play hard. And as we got popular and started being hired to, now they call them shows, but in those days they were dances. Now we play one set, and in those days we played 3 and sometimes 4. And we learned that that's what the crowd wanted. They wanted to dance. So we did everything we could. We did everything that we could figure out of Little Richards, Jerry Lee Lewis, any of that kind of stuff. Anything that came out on popular music that rocked, we wanted to do that. And so at that time, we were one of the few groups that were doing that. We were down in Tacoma rocking our socks off. And number one, also, it's because we liked it. We liked that stuff. So when the Beatles and the Stones, right at the beginning of Beatlemania, when the Beatles came out, we thought they were wonderful, but we didn't try to do three-part harmonies. We weren't trying to do Michelle and the beautiful stuff they did. But when they did Drive My Car, we did that. We jumped on that. When they did Dizzy Miss Lizzy, the Richard song, we immediately jumped on that. So that's kind of how we got started, and that's kind of where the word got out. As we played, fortunately, we became more and more popular. And so a local record company said, you guys have got to do an album. We got to get you in the studio to do an album. And so we were 17. We thought, God, that's great. Always wanted to do an album. How do you do that? And we played this club called the Red Carpet, where we really got started. We played it one night, and our manager at the time and the owner of the record company came by and said, "Okay, we're going to get you in the studio. We're going to do an album." We said, "Great. When are we going to go in there?" And he said, "Tomorrow morning at 9:00 in downtown Seattle." So we walked into the studio. We hadn't rehearsed. I mean, we were play ready because we played 4 sets a night, so we could, we were tight as you could possibly be, but we didn't have any other originals. We didn't, so we walked in the studio and hooked everything up, and you guys have been in studios, did sound check and all that kind of stuff, and serious looking guys staring at us through this big glass window. We were totally intimidated. And so they said, "So what are you going to do?" We started looking at each other and thought, "Geez, I don't know. What do you want to do?" And so we thought, well, the first thing that we would do is the Little Richard song, "Keep a Knockin'," because that was pretty harsh. So we did that, and it was okay. It wasn't really good. It was okay. And Jerry said, "Well, I've got this song that I've been working on called 'The Witch.'" And it was, so we kind of figured it out there in the studio. Now if you try to figure out songs in a studio, people look at you like you're nuts. And we sort of were. We were just kids. We didn't know how it worked. So we worked out this song in the studio and we recorded it. And they immediately ran out. They were going to put it out as a single. They're going to do the Witch on one side and Keep Knocking on the other side. And the local rock radio station, which in those days, it was KJR, and their big rock jocks got a hold of it. And we found out later that they would only play it in the afternoons when the kids got home from school. They wouldn't play it for the adults during the day. So when the kids got in their cars in the high school parking lot, turned their radios on, then they could play that. Well, the Witch went insane. It sold like 25,000 copies in 2 or 3 days. I mean, and again, you have to realize we were just kids. We were playing in rock and roll clubs, and all of a sudden, we're opening shows for the Beach Boys, and we're backstage talking to Mike Love, and it was a real heady atmosphere. Kinks came to town, and we toured the Northwest opening shows for the Kinks, and that's how we got to be longtime friends with Ray Davies. It's just because we opened a bunch of shows for him. In later years, he invited us back to London to open some shows that he was doing there. So once that record got out there, it started happening pretty fast. Then, the normal thing. Okay, we got to get you guys back in the studio. We got to follow up that Witch record. And so once again, we're playing at the red carpet. One of the songs that we used to play was just a simple 3-chord song. It was on the radio. It was the name of the song was Farmer John, and it was almost a unison song, but it was 3 chords and 4/4 beat. And so while they're putting the chairs up on the table, and we got to be back in the studio the next morning, and now we're just hearing about it now, we put the instruments back on and said, okay, how are we going to? Well, let's do the Farmer John riff. So we did that. And meanwhile, I digress here a little, and I apologize for that. In those days, most of the drummers were like human metronomes. Their whole bag, particularly the Seattle guys, the jazz guys, their whole bag was just keeping time. Well, there was this British group at the time that came out, the Dave Clark Five, and we really liked what they did. We really liked what they did with the drums, with the single stroke roll. So we thought, okay, let's do this Farmer John riff, and we'll put some single stroke roll drum breaks in it. be in the studio in the morning. So we go in the studio. That's all we had. We kind of ran through it. We went in the studio the next day, and Jerry said, "Don't worry about it. I'll have some words when I get to the studio." So we do it. We lay down the band track. Jerry's in there singing, and Larry, the guitar player, looked over at me and said, "What's he singing?" I said, "I don't know. He's singing some words. I don't know what they are." That became Psycho, and it just did what The Witch did. It just exploded. So with The Witch and Psycho, nobody was doing songs like that, like I suggested, that, they were doing jazzy stuff. All of a sudden, the rock station is playing The Witch and Psycho, which are just hard rock, 3-chord, drum break, guitar solo songs. And at that point, we were off and running.
You guys created punk rock in that moment.
Well, that's generous. I've heard people say that, and essentially, I guess that's what we were doing, because I got away from music. I had to go in the military for a while and go overseas, and I wasn't playing music, but I happened to be somewhere where I can't remember who I heard. It was either the Clash. I think it was the Clash, and I was listening to them, and I was thinking, God, those guys have the right idea. I don't know who they are or where they're from, but they're killing it. That's awesome. And I had a chance to meet them years later, and they said, "Yeah, well, we liked what you guys were doing, and we tried to copy." I said, "You kidding me? You guys play football stadiums. We played punk rock clubs. How does that be?" And one of the things that I've always enjoyed, I was a professional airline pilot for a long time and playing on the side. And when I retired from that business, Sonics fired up again and started going to Europe and doing tours. And we did Japan, and we went to Australia 3 or 4 times, and New Zealand. But when you do that, you meet other musicians, you meet other bands. And at our first show, the first show we did when we got back together, which was in New York, I did a magazine interview with a slick rock and roll magazine. I don't remember who it was at the time, but the interviewer that I sat down was a real nice guy, and we had a good time. It was a good interview. And so later on, we played the show. The place was completely sold out. It was really fun. And we came back to the dressing room all wet, and we were going to go downstairs and sign some autographs, which is something we did in the early days. And this writer came and found me and said, "Hey, Rob, there's a young European rock and roll band here, and they wondered if they could have their pictures taken with you." And I said, "Sure, of course. We're going to be down in a second." So we go downstairs, and they have these tables set up and all kinds of albums, and you've seen the drill. And we were signing autographs, and these 5 good-looking young guys came up, and they're all dressed alike, which impressed me. I thought that's pretty cool. And they said, basically, we really like you guys. We always have. Can we get our picture taken with you? I said, "Sure. Come back here behind the table." So they posed for pictures, and I got talking to the guitar player, and we had a nice long conversation back there. And I said, I was so stupid. My God, I still cringe about who I was talking to, because I didn't know who I was talking to. And I asked the guitar player, "What's the name of your little band?" I actually said that. I was so stupid. I'm so embarrassed, because he's a lifelong friend. We've been friends forever. And he said, "The Hives." And I said, "The what?" And he said, "The Hives." I went, "Oh, well, that's a cool name." So he pulled a dollar bill out of his pocket and got a Sharpie and put his email address and his phone number on there. And he said, "You and I ought to stay in touch. We ought to talk whenever we get a chance." And that became a long friendship. And every time we played Stockholm, they'd come get on stage with us and play with us. And we'd go out and drink beers and have dinner. And wherever we were, they'd always join us and always come up. Well, I had never heard of them. I had to write down the name of their little band. So when I got home after that show, I Googled it. And good Lord, I found out who they were. Not only are they really good, they were superstars in Europe at that time. They were like they are now. They were filling up football stadiums. But they asked me to play with them in Seattle. And so I got my sax and went down there and I joined them at one of the big rock clubs in Seattle. And sitting backstage talking to them, there's two brothers, Nick and Pelle Almquist. And Pelle is the crazy front man and Nick is the guitar player, his brother. And Pelle told me, he said, when we were in high school in Sweden, he said, I got a big stack of Sonics records, albums, and I took them to the school cafeteria where we were all eating lunch together. And I said, boys, this is what we're going to do. And that's what they did. They patterned themselves after us, and they did a better job than we did because they're doing a world tour right now.
Right. Well, we also, I saw recently on YouTube a show that you did that Eddie Vedder came out, guy from Crash Test Dummies, I think, guy from Screaming Trees. So a lot of people want to get on stage with you.
Well, we did it. Yeah, I remember that was at a big record store up in Bellevue, and it kind of opens up. And I don't know how it came about, but yeah, Screaming Trees, Presidents of the United States of America.
Oh, right, not Crash Test Dummies, President.
Yeah, 4 or 5 of the 90s Seattle area grunge bands. And so we had a rehearsal the day before, and everybody, that wanted to came up and did a song with us. And it was a lot of fun meeting those guys and doing the Eddie thing is funny because one of the songs that we did and that we do now is a song "Leaving Here," and we were playing that. We were at a show in Seattle, and we were playing it, and I looked down in front of the stage, and right in front of the stage, I'd never seen him before, but I knew who he was. Eddie Vedder was down there dancing and singing the words, in unison, along with Freddie, our singer at the time. And so that was kind of it. So we said, well, any chance that Eddie Vedder wants to come do a song with us? Because he likes us. His guitar player is a really nice guy, and he's kind of a friend of the band, but they're much bigger time than the Sonics were. And I said, well, Eddie's really, you got to go through his PR people, and he's really busy. So we said, okay. So we go to the record store, and we're doing that show. That whole show is on YouTube. You can see it from beginning to end. And somebody came up to the stage and said, Rob. I said, yeah, what? Said, Eddie's here. Well, go ask him if he wants to do Leaving Here. It's okay. Disappears in the crowd. Comes back and says, yeah, he wants to do it. That's how we found out we were going to do Leaving Here with Eddie Vedder. I played harp in it, and I was totally embarrassed because it was in a key. It was in A, and I don't like to play harp. I'm not a very good harp player to begin with. But when I do play harp, I generally play it in C, or in G, rather. And Eddie sang it in A, and I happened to have an A harp. So people say, oh, yeah, you played harp with Eddie Vedder. I said, no, I stood next to him and made harp noises. I kind of. So there it is on the internet, and I'm playing this bogus harp solo, which I'm a little embarrassed about. Eddie was awesome. He got into it, and so did we, and we were real tight behind him, and that was a good time. And then afterwards, he and Mike McCready, his guitar player, came down to the dressing room and they just sat there and BS'd with us for an hour. But he got up there on his own. I guess we somehow or other would let him know that we were going to be there and he could come do that. Never thought that he would, but he did. And he was a real, you know, you can see what he did on YouTube. He was a real professional. He's a real showman. So that was a lot of fun.
That is an awesome story. Thank you for sharing that. I love hearing those kind of experiences. And I was kind of curious. I had read that in addition to everything you were just talking about, that you had a full career as a commercial airline pilot. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a little story goes along with that, which I'll share with you. I've told it to interviewers in the past. Yeah, what happened, make a long story short, is the Vietnam War started. Mm-hmm. And I was going to University of Washington, and my mom and dad weren't wealthy, so I was working my way through the university by playing every Friday and Saturday night. And once in a great while, I would have to drop out because I didn't have enough money. So I'd drop out and play rock and roll and save my money, and then I'd go back to school the next semester. Well, I fell behind the program of draft deferment. And so when I was one semester away from graduating, getting my degree, I got a letter from the draft board. And they said, "You're drafted, come down to this physical." I went, "Oh God." So I went down and it was serious as death. There was a room full of guys in their tidy whities holding paperwork, you know, and going around being examined. And I was one of the examinees. So when it was my turn to sit in the room across the desk from the guy who wasn't smiling, he said, "Well, you're going." And I said, "When am I going?" And he said, 2 weeks. And I said, "Geez, I've been working for literally 5 years trying to get my degree, and I'm one semester away from doing it. Is there any possibility you could hold me off for long enough for me to do that?" And he said, "No, son, you don't understand. You're going in 2 weeks." And so I left, and I thought, "Oh, I'm totally screwed." The thing that I had during that time in the Sonics, we were very busy playing all over from California all the way to Canada, and to get around, to avoid taking turns with each other's cars, which we used to do. I was a pilot. I was a Navy pilot in Vietnam, and later on, but when I walked out of there with the news that I was going to be in a rifle company in the jungle, I went to the Navy. Let's see, I checked with the Marine Corps. I went to the Air Force looking into pilot programs because I love flying and I had a private license and I used to fly the Sonics to shows. And the Navy said, "Well, come on out for the weekend. We'll give you a physical. We'll have you for 3 days. We'll put you up. We'll give you a physical. There's a whole day of mental tests you got to take, and we'll see where we go from there." Well, at the end of the 3 days, they said, "You're good. You qualified. You're gonna, if you want to, we'll send you to officer candidate school and flight school down in Pensacola, Florida." So that's what I did. That's how I became a naval officer, and I wound up flying the A-6 off an aircraft carrier during the Vietnam War. And so I came back, make a long story short, and I'm taking too long with this, which I apologize for, but when I got back, got out of the military, got hired by the airlines. I spent a career. Ultimately, I flew for several airlines like a lot of us did. I flew for Continental, and then I flew for U.S. Air, and that's where I spent my career, flying the 757, the 76, and the Airbus. And when I reached the end of the line, which in the airline business is age related. You reach a certain age and you can't fly anymore. I was a captain on the Airbus flying out of Philadelphia. And I got hired by a business jet company called NetJets. And they fly rich people and sports stars. And that was kind of fun for me. I was flying an airplane called the Falcon, and it had the two of us pilots and a flight attendant, and there was room in the back for like 10 people. So my past catching up with me, they said, okay, you guys are going to take the airplane, fly to Chicago O'Hare, and you're going to pick the Beach Boys up who are coming in from Italy, and you're going to fly them to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and they've got a show. So we fly there, and we go to the little private terminal, and the guy that I was flying with said, well, do you know the Beach Boys? I said, oh, yeah, I know them real well. I did probably 10 shows with them in my youth. I said, well, you go get them. So I said, okay. So I walked in and got them. So guys, you're with me. We're going out the airplane. Everybody ready? Let's go. So I'm walking across the ramp with the Beach Boys, and I'm walking with Bruce Johnson. And I said, Bruce, you probably don't remember me. I'm Rob Lind. I was with the Sonics. I used to open shows with you guys. And he went, good God, of course I remember you. So get on the airplane, fly them to Cedar Rapids. Their manager's handing out hotel keys. They all get off the airplane. Mike Love is sitting there by himself doing some paperwork. I walked over and sat down with him. And I told him who I was. And he said, God, look at you. You went out and got a real job. He said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I just flew you here. And so we had that conversation. Well, the highlight of it, I flew Sting, and I flew Sting and his wife. I picked them up in Las Vegas. I flew captain of the Yankees baseball team. My favorite one was, you guys are going to LA, and the Grammys are going to get over there tomorrow night while you're there. And you're going to pick up Bruce Springsteen and fly him to, where was it? West Palm Beach, Florida. So we're going to do a transcontinental flight in the middle of the night with Bruce and his wife. Okay. So we go there, and we're parked out on the ramp. And normally when you, in that business, when you fly the big people like that, they show up in the black limos or the black SUVs. And so we're sitting there on the airplane, the three of us just talking, and we're looking out for black SUVs. And I went up to the cockpit to get something. I was looking out the cockpit windows, and I saw this guy and a girl, and they were holding hands and walking across the ramp all by themselves. And I went back and I said, guys, I think our passenger's here. I think I'm seeing Bruce and his wife. So everybody's, screwed. And it was, and they get on the airplane, and very nice, very personable. Well, the rule for those of us that were flying people like that was, introduce yourselves, explain the airplane, do a safety briefing, all that kind of stuff, and then go mind your own business. Because one of the reasons they pay all that money to fly in a private jet is they don't want to be bothered, and you can't blame them. But the thing was that we had a song called Have Love Will Travel. And it's probably the most prolific song of all the Sonic songs. It's been in half a dozen movies. It's done worldwide commercials for Land Rover was a popular one, and BMW. They used that song to close the London Olympics. I mean, it was an incredibly popular song for us just by luck. It was just a cover we did. But Bruce and the E Street Band played a show in Seattle, and he made remarks. He said, we're going to do a song right now by the Sonics, and I'm not talking about the basketball team. And then they played Have Love. Well, that story got back to us, and I thought, geez, that was really nice. That was generous of number one star in the United States, probably in the music business, to say something nice like that. Well, here he is on my airplane. We're halfway across the country in the middle of the night. And I had to get up and go back and use the head. So I put the flight attendant in my seat, and the other guy flew. And I went back, and Bruce reached up and stopped me, and he said, excuse me, how much longer do you think it's going to be? And I took a wild guess, said, well, it's going to be about probably another 2.5 hours, something. I went, oh, okay. And then I did what I shouldn't have done. I said, well, I'm happy that I got an opportunity to say something to you just for a moment, because you did something nice for me and some friends of mine, and I wanted to thank you for it. And his wife snapped her head around and looked at me. I thought, oh boy, Rob, you're screwing up here. Probably going to cost you your flying job. And Bruce said, oh, what was that? And I said, well, I'm Rob Lind. I'm the sax player in the Sonics. That's as far as I got. Because don't quote me on this. I don't want to get Bruce in trouble for. Bruce said, holy shit, what are you doing here? Sit down and let's talk music. So there we are, flying across the country. I'm sitting in the back of the airplane talking to Bruce. Flight attendant comes back to check on me. And I said, go up and keep Bill company. I'm going to talk to Bruce here for a little bit. So I actually had the honor, if you will, to sit and talk to Bruce about music. And it was really great. And I said, you did have love for it. That was really great. He said, oh, you guys did the best job of that. He said, I always loved that song and I always wanted to do it. So when we were playing in your hometown, I had to do it. There was no getting around it. And I said, well, I always wanted to do Cadillac Ranch. I just love that song. And he slapped me on the knee, said, well, God, you should have. Go back to the Sonics and pick that up and do it. That'd be a great song for you guys. That's kind of the way that conversation went. So that was a pretty fun night. All in all, I'm sorry it took so long, but that was a pretty fun night.
Amazing. Well, I have to just say, in full disclosure, I grew up about 2 towns over from where Bruce grew up. So I'm a Jersey Shore girl, and the stories about him have aligned completely with what you're sharing. So when you started saying that, oh, I hope he was great, because that's all I've ever really heard from anybody, and he was always around town here and there, even in the height of that part of the career. So okay, this is a perfect segue, because I know that you re-entered touring and the business after all of that, and I'm just so curious how that was for you. Had things changed tremendously, or was it just like, we're back in it now? How did you feel about that?
Well, technology had changed. There was a lot. We started playing so much that we got used to it pretty quickly. We did a couple of European tours where we were riding around in a Sprinter and decided we'd had enough. And plus I was hanging out with the Hives, which is not a good thing because they always use this awesome zillion-dollar tour bus. So we need a tour bus. So we got a tour bus and we started doing European tours with tour bus. And that made life a little bit easier. Plus, as I said, we weren't doing 3-4 sets a night. We were always the headliner, and we'd come out and do our set. It was an hour set, and come back and go back to the hotel and go to bed because we had to get up the next morning and go to the next town. So that kind of there's kind of I'll contradict myself. I'll make this a short story. When we did our first show, it was at a kind of a festival, and this is the first show after we all got back, the very first one. I still have a picture of it in my living room. And our relatives all came from the West Coast and they flooded the place. And so we showed up at this hall in New York. And it's where we were going to, and there were some other acts. There was like the Strawberry Alarm Clock, from the 60s. They were opening for us. and some other acts, and we were the headliners. So we showed up early for to rehearse the set and get the volume, get the levels all set and all that kind of stuff. So, and I tell this story on us because we always laugh about it to show you where we were in those days. Got up on the stage, and we're looking at the mic placement, and there were these big black boxes at our feet, right across the front of the stage. And we didn't know what they were. And one of the guys said, "What are these boxes?" And one of the stage managers looked at us in full disbelief and said, well, guys, those are monitors." and the guitar player said, "What do they do?" I said, "Well, that's so you can hear yourself." I said, "God, we can hear ourselves? Awesome." That's where we were. We came up on stage for our first big show, saw monitors, and didn't know what they were. I'll tell that story on us.
That's fantastic. It's so fantastic. You have me rolling. The Bruce Springsteen in that. Well, let me ask you. I guess the Vietnam War ended the Sonics as it was, and then you just you came back. When you came back, when you guys sat down, how did you pick what songs you were going to play from all the covers you did? 4 sets a night plus the 3 albums that you did back in the 60s.
Well, like any band that has a few songs or maybe a lot of songs, there are certain songs that the crowd has to hear. Before the Vietnam War broke us up, we got back together after it was over, but before that happened, one of the we played, for instance, with the radio station big record acts at the time. We played a number of times with the Mamas and Papas. We played a number of times, many times with the Beach Boys. Got to where they were our buddies. Played with Jan and Dean. Got to be friends with them. We played with the Lovin' Spoonful. That's where I wanted to learn to play harmonica, because I was around John Sebastian, and he was so good that I'd get back in the car and we'd be driving, and I'd be back in the back seat trying to remember what John did so I could try to play it myself. Stuff like that. So I'll tell you a Hives anecdote. We were doing sound check in downtown Stockholm, and Nick and Michael, their guitar player, and their manager at the time came walking in the place while we were doing sound check, and we were working on The Witch, which was our first song and which we played every night. And how do you forget that? It's like the Beach Boys forgetting how to play Fun, Fun, Fun. We were straightening it out, getting ready to play it, and the boys walked up, the Swedes walked up, and, "Hey guys," I said, "Oh, you guys walked in we were trying to figure out The Witch. I bet that was funny." And Nick said, "We just opened a show for the Rolling Stones." And he said,
I don't know that one.
When we went to sound check, they were trying to figure out how to play Satisfaction. And they were all screwed up about it because it wasn't working for them. And I thought, well, if Mick and Keith can't figure out Satisfaction, we're straightening out The Witch. I guess that's okay.
Oh, that's so fantastic. So fantastic. Okay, so you guys, got back together. What was that, 2007 or so that festival was?
Well, I got back from the ship in November of 1973. There is, if you get on YouTube, and I know you're overly conversant with that, we did a rock and roll show at the Paramount Theater, which is the biggest theater in Seattle. And it was put on by KJR, the big rock radio station. And there were several other bands. The Wailers were there. I don't remember who else. But we were the headliners, and they want us to do three songs, I'm sorry. So we did The Witch, and I think we did Psycho. Anytime the Sonics are going to play, oh, you guys got to play Witch and Psycho. I mean, it's just like, you just know you have to do that. And we had a third song, so we did Lucille. And that's on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and look for Sonics Lucille Live, that's what we sounded like in 1973. We had never played together since I got back. Larry at the time, our guitar player, was managing a record store. So we'd go over we knew this thing was coming up. And we wanted to be good. So we went over to the record store every night and rehearsed till 10, 11 o'clock at night. So we were ready. And so we did that show. And the only thing I remember is we were doing Lucille, and the crowd was standing on the seats. There were theater seats, folding down seats. Nobody was sitting in them. They were all standing on them and waving their arms. And I was concentrating because I hadn't been in front of a crowd in a long time. And I just remember seeing that out of my periphery. That alone, of the three songs we did, showed up on the internet, showed up on YouTube. And I was pretty proud of the way we sounded. And, if you're curious at some time, bring it up and take a look at us. That was us in 1973 after the war ended.
That's what I'm doing when we stop here.
Yeah. I don't know when we got rolling again. It was sometime after that. I wasn't playing a lot of music. I was playing a little bit because I was getting ready I went down to Los Angeles. I went to University of Southern California and was going to film school, and I was working as a director and an assistant director for a small production company in Hollywood. That's what I was doing at the time. And we started, I remember what it was. Our manager at the time said, they're going crazy for you guys in Europe. We got to go to Europe. Well, we hadn't rehearsed or anything. And so we thought, that's like going to the moon for us. We thought, oh, God, how cool could that be? We're going to have to start rehearsing. And a couple of the guys, the original Sonics, Bob Bennett, the drummer, and Andy, the bass player, they wanted nothing to do with it. The last time all the original Sonics played was in 1967. And so we had to pick up two other guys to fill that. And Jerry, Larry, and I started rehearsing to get ready for that. Well, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, I was pretty good friends with Nick Almquist and the Hives. And he got a hold of me and said, hey, I heard you guys are coming to Europe. And I said, yeah, you guys want to hang out with us, play some rock and roll? He said, yeah, of course. But he said, I want to tell you that you can't find there is no Sonics albums in London. He said, you can't find a Sonics album in London. Somehow or other, the word got out that you guys are coming, and the whole city is totally sold out of Sonics music. And that's when we first started getting the first inklings that maybe there was some interest in people in seeing us play music. Now you asked a good question. How did we pick what songs? Because there are certain Sonic songs that you have to play. We had to play Witch, Psycho, Shot Down, Have Love Will Travel,
Cinderella, probably.
Cinderella for sure. He's Waiting for sure. Had to do that. Always had to do those songs. And when we played in Bilbao, Spain, once again, Nick said, when you go into Bilbao and play Cinderella, he said, you'll have people in your dressing room crying. I went, oh, Nick, they cry for you guys. They don't cry for us. Well, he was right. We played this sold-out show in Bilbao, and we couldn't get into our dressing room because it was full of people. They were crying, and one guy kind of embarrassed Jerry, the lead singer, because this guy had Jerry, and he was planting European kisses on each cheek, boom, 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 boom. You guys are so wonderful. Boom, boom. I've never seen that. Well, we were just goobers from the Pacific Northwest. That's the first time we'd ever seen anything like that. And so we learned what songs people wanted to hear. We learned what songs work. We didn't have any ego problems. We'd try a song and it didn't work, we'd get rid of it. Musicians are musicians. You get on stage and you play something, you can feel it in your gut if it's not working, even if it's right and you're playing the right notes. Being a sax player, I stand in front of the stage. I watch the crowds at all times. I take all my cues from the crowds, and you can tell, if they're waving beer bottles and singing along with you, they're liking it. And if you're playing something and the hands come down, funk to their side, people, now's our chance to go to the men's room. We're going to drop that song, whatever it was. We're not going to do that again. We had a pretty song. We tried to be commercial. It's called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. One of the last songs we did in the studio. And it had harmony singing. And we got set up to do a tour of Japan with a really great Japanese band called The Bodies. Those guys were awesome. Awesome young guys, awesome musicians. We just had a blast. And we were playing in, I don't think it was Tokyo. I think it was, I can't remember. It was a big hall, and The Bodies opened for us. And the Japanese people are so great. I went to them because they were real good. They were the big heroes. They were the teenage rock band boys, and they were awesome. And I said, you guys, we should be opening for you. You guys are the big guns around here. Let us start the show and you come close it out. And they went, no. No, we have to open for you. Okay. So we went out and did the show. Where it was, I'm trying to remember where it was. Well, that's not important where it was. It was a big show. Big crowd right up to the front of the stage. And I remember I thought I was looking at about 1,000 iPhones because all these iPhones were up in the air, and their hands were up in the air, and we were rocking. We were doing the rock songs that we do and do pretty well because we're a rock and roll band. And in the middle of the set, we started into Have Love, not Have Love. We started into that song, and it's a slower song. It's like a 4 chord, C, A, F, G, and Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And Jerry based that when he wrote it on a British act that he'd heard, PJ Proby or somebody like that, and he was singing in that kind of a voice. And so we started that song. Boy, it's like I was saying, all the hands came down. It's like the whole audience said, time out, we don't like this. So after the show, I went backstage and said, we got to quit doing that. And Jerry, who wrote it, got kind of mad at me, and he was my best friend. I'd known him since we were 15. His feelings were real hurt. How could you say that? And about that time, our manager, who at the time was Buck Ormsby, he came blasting into the dressing room and said, you guys have got to stop doing that goddamn song. And Jerry stormed out of the room, but we never did it again after that. You just learn, if it doesn't work, get off it right now. And that's what we did. It was a pretty nice song. It's not a bad song, but the Bodies, who were a Japanese rock and roll band and literally kicked butt, they were great. They opened up and the place was vibrating. Then we come out, we do our stick, start Psycho or something like that, keep the crowd going. And right in the middle, we go to Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, When You Walk, real dramatic. Oh, Japanese kids didn't like that at all. That's the last time we ever played it.
Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy. You have a movie. Is the movie out? Is the movie in production? It's been working for a while, called Boom, I believe.
Yeah, it is out. As a matter of fact, I just got a note from the director. His name is Jordan Albertson. About a month ago, Jordan just announced that it's been picked up by a distribution company. So in the very near future, in the past, I tried to work a deal with Jordan. I said, hey, look, why don't we book like a theater in some of these cities and run the movie, and when the theater goes dark and it says the end, the lights come on, the curtain opens up, and there's the Sonics, and we're playing live. Wouldn't that be great? And he said, I can't do it. I can only do film festivals. I'm prohibited from doing anything but film festivals. Well, this thing I got from him about a month ago, he said all bets are off. The movie's been picked up by a distribution company. It's called The Forge. And I think their headquarters are in London, which means that it can start being sold. It can be sold in record stores. It can be sold on the internet. It can be sold at gigs. He said what they want to do, and I don't think they're too far into their planning. He said they want to do some big, grandiose openings. The first two, one being Seattle, because that's where you guys are from, and the second one, Los Angeles. And they want to show the movie, and then Sonics come out and play Sonic songs. And I tried to pin him down. Well, let me put our tour manager in touch. Who shall I have him call? And he said, well, they're not that far along. So that, Kevin, is all I know about it right at this moment. It's a relatively new thing. I'd say 2 or 3 months they've had the rights to it. They bought Jordan out. I don't think he even has decision making on it anymore. I think it's probably owned lock, stock, and barrel by the Forge distribution company. Right. But that's where it is right now.
Now, if
he's done a good job.
If this happens, is it going to be the last lineup, or would you be able to get 2 or 3/5 of the original members back out?
No, it's going to be the touring band, and that would be the only member of the original Sonics is me. I'm the OG, as Larry hasn't played. We did 2 tours with Robert Plant, which is another story, but a lot of fun. And we came back off the tour with Robert Plant. Larry quit playing guitar. And that was 3 years ago. He said, I haven't opened my guitar case in 3 years. Jerry, lead singer, he's been having some health problems for a couple of years. He just can't do it. He can't get up on stage in front of people anymore. He gets real nervous, and so it's me and the guys that we've been on the road with. Now, two of those guys, guitar player Evan Watson and the drummer Dusty Watson, Evan Foster and Dusty Watson, those guys have been with me for 10 years. This has been the Sonics. We're the people that have been doing all the touring and all the playing. So if they do that, and if we play, it'll be us. And we're the people that are in that movie. Because Jordan brought a film crew on one of our European tours and followed us around, was in the dressing room with us, off stage, filmed some parts of the shows, filmed us in. And there were people that came out to see us, like Glenn from the Sex Pistols, I think. I can't remember his last name. He hung out with us, was in the dressing room with us. And so that's where a lot of that footage came from. So when you see that movie, what you're seeing is the Sonics touring band. It's us right now.
Very nice. Very nice. I'm excited. I want to see it. I've heard about it for a few years now that it's been kicking around. So very excited for that. I would love if you guys could figure out how to, if those 2 shows work, do a little mini US tour. DC's a popular market, and I don't live far from it.
I'd love to. The pandemic, we shut down for the pandemic. And we were starting to get shows after the pandemic. We had a 5-week European tour set up that we should already be back from. And we were rehearsing for that tour in a recording studio in downtown Seattle. And I won't go over the gory details, but there were 5 guys in the band. 4 of us at the same time came down with COVID.
Ouch.
And for some reason, I had all the shots and all the boosters and everything. I came down with it pretty hard. I actually wound up in the hospital for a few days. I was fine. I got out of it. I didn't have any breathing problems or anything. But it shut the whole Sonics down. And so that 5-week tour got canceled, which I'm sorry about, because we were playing all our favorite places, London and Stockholm and Oslo, Norway, and all over Europe and the places that we've played many times. I also had a deal with the Hives were going to come mess around with us again. I always look forward to that because they're our friends. But the whole thing went out the window. So now we're just now booking shows in the United States. We have our first 2 shows. One is in Santa Ana, California. The next one is in San Francisco. Then we're playing in Mexico City, doing a festival in Mexico City, and then we're coming back and we're doing the Echoplex in LA, and we're doing a place in San Jose, and one other place. So the local shows are starting to come in now, and we're getting ready to play those.
Beautiful. Well, we're going to have to keep our eye on that. We're almost up against the hour here. So anything else you want to throw out there before we finish up?
I don't think so, Kevin. I think I've probably actually talked too much, and for that I apologize.
No, not at all.
No,
Not at all.
I can keep going. This was so fantastic. I just appreciate your time so much.
It is.
Well,
it's
thank
good
you
stuff.
thank you for the honor of the interview. I really do appreciate it. And we have a Facebook page, the Sonics Facebook page. There's nothing on it right now, but that's when things are going to start getting announced. So once in a while, if you check that for any new information, hopefully we'll start getting it on there. We're just pulling ourselves back together again after the pandemic.
All right. We will make sure to put the link to that in the show notes for everybody listening. And
well, great. Thanks. That's a great idea.
If you are enjoying All That Jam, please like and subscribe to our social media channels at All That Jam Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or visit our website, allthatjampod.com. Make sure to sign up for our email list and tune in every week for new episodes.
also, look for full interviews on our YouTube channel. And remember, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long.